Following a heated argument with ABC, Kasem left American Top 40 in 1988. He owed them money, they alleged. They were corrupt, he claimed. According to leaked memos, ABC attempted to ruin his career. However, why? What was it about Kasem that so alarmed them? Bad scripts were not the only reason for his furious outbursts. They had a far more significant issue. Kasem paid $7 million for rights that were rightfully his when he returned to AT40 in 1998. Who was rigging the show is the actual question, not if it was rigged. On April 27, 1932, Kasem was born in Detroit, Michigan. Kamal Amin Kasem was his full name. His parents, Amin and Helen, owned a modest grocery business and had immigrated to the United States from Lebanon. It was hard. Families all throughout the world had been destroyed by the Great Depression, and by 1933, 25% of people were unemployed. They were struggling to make ends meet while living in a working-class area. His father named him after the Turkish politician he respected, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. However, Kasem's parents forbade him from speaking Arabic at home, despite their deep cultural ties. They wanted him to sound American and blend in. He then claimed that this caused him to feel as though a piece of who he was gone. Rationing brought forth by the war made operating a grocery store even more difficult when he was only 10 years old in 1942. But despite all of this adversity, an unexpected event occurred. Kasem found the radio. It inspired a fantasy that would alter his life and filled his tiny universe with voices and stories. During family trips, Kasem continued to immerse himself in his Lebanese heritage, despite his parents' disapproval of Arabic being spoken at home. Even though he was not fluent in the language, the stories, food, and music lingered with him and influenced him in unexpected ways. He turned down offers from Hollywood to play Arab villains in the 1970s. He did not wish to contribute to negative preconceptions. He went so far as to tell producers that he would sooner lose his job than portray a cruel role. He made sure his own children, Julie, Mike, Carrie, and Liberty, were aware of their Druze ancestry by 1980. Every summer, he would host family get-togethers in Michigan and prepare Lebanese cuisine. When his 12-year-old son Mike repeated a disparaging statement he had heard about Arabs in 1990, Kasem sat him down and made sure he understood their origins. He co-founded the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee in 1982 as a result of the same fire. Even while he played Shaggy's amiable voice on Scooby-Doo, from 1969 until 2009, he was battling the same prejudice he had previously encountered. Kasem had developed a deep affection for radio by the time he was 12 in 1944. He would practice in front of a mirror while he sat in his room and listen to shows like The Lone Ranger, repeating the voices aloud. The voice that would eventually reach millions of people began in a small bedroom in Detroit. He could talk 120 words per minute without ever hurrying because of how fluid and quick his delivery was. He developed an obsession. He would listen for hours, even during World War II when food was scarce and life was still uncertain. He eventually had the opportunity to work on the actual Lone Ranger radio show in 1950 while attending Wayne State University, where he voiced the children's segments. By high school, more than 1,000 mirror sessions had paid off. In 1970, the result of that same devotion was American Top 40, a program that eventually aired on 1,000 stations worldwide. From 1946 to 1950, Kasem excelled in high school. At Northwestern High School, he became a member of the drama club and performed in school plays. Imitating 20 distinct dialects that left the teachers stunned, he began commentating on football games. And by 1948, when he was just 16, 500-person audiences would pause and pay attention. He was referred to as the Voice, even though he wasn't compensated for it. It gave him self-assurance when he was still feeling alienated. To keep things interesting, he invented player statistics and called 15 games in 1949. His blend of fun and statistics served as a sneak peek at what was to follow. In front of 300 spectators, he played the lead in the school production of Our Town in 1950. Even though racial tensions were high in Detroit at the time, Kasem discovered that storytelling was his forte. During the Korean War, Kasem was drafted into the Army in November 1952 at the age of 20. After being deployed abroad, he started working as a DJ for the military radio station. It was risky. While cannon rumbled in the background, he operated from mobile vans, broadcasting music to 50,000 troops. The temperature occasionally fell below -20 eb. Nevertheless, he tried to cheer them up by playing Elvis Presley and telling jokes, like he would eventually do on his Top 40 show. He interviewed injured soldiers and created 200 shows. But he was traumatized by the conflict. He witnessed the deaths of pals. He spoke out against war in the 1960s because of the pain that remained with him. He was promoted to sergeant in 1955 and was in charge of 10 broadcasters. Even though he only made $100 a month, those 4 years had a profound impact on him. He started performing voice work for NBC by 1960 and was rapidly moving up the ranks. When he began working at WDTR in Detroit in 1952, it was his first significant break. He was balancing theatrical studies at Wayne State with a part-time job as a DJ. He did voiceovers for advertisements for auto dealerships and spun jazz albums. The hours were harsh, $1.50 per hour for 16-hour shifts. To get through the day, he occasionally only drank coffee and ate inexpensive diner food. The station encouraged him to change his name due to his Arab heritage. During the Korean War, they feared that Kasem would not be accepted by the public. He used sound effects from vintage movies to make the show humorous, despite all of this pressure. He had a small following by 1954. However, the funds were insufficient. To make ends meet, he had to pawn his own belongings. There were no unions in radio at the time to safeguard up-and-coming talent. It was challenging. He stayed to jazz since he wasn't ready to follow the trend of rock and roll. He relocated to Flint, Michigan in 1957 in order to broadcast the Kasem program on WTRX. In a population of around 200,000 people, he attracted roughly 500 regular listeners with his outrageous character voices and homemade sound effects. But hatred spread quickly. Racist letters referring to him as a foreigner were sent. Ads were removed by sponsors, and he lost 30% of his pay. He had to repeatedly change his name on air before deciding on Casey. After he discussed Middle Eastern culture on TV, he even received a death threat. But he persisted in pushing. He included entertaining competitions, such as reward guessing for song titles. By 1958, he had a minor TV spot thanks to the show. However, when the station released him, claiming it was due to ethnic concerns, even that was taken away. Flint's unemployment rate was 12%, and the mood was depressing. However, Casey continued. He returned to Detroit in 1959 to work at WJLB. He launched a brand new countdown program called Top 10 at 10 there. He started from the beginning, going to 20 record stores each week to check what people were purchasing. The Coaster's single, Charlie Brown, sold more than 1 million copies that year. However, the local radio landscape proved difficult. Some DJs even attempted to attack him at the station after accusing him of manipulating the list. To keep to his schedule, he was sleeping at the studio and earning $300 a month. The audience adored the dedications and facts he included, such as updates on Elvis Presley's 1959 Army discharge. He increased his nightly audience from 10,000 to 12,500. But there was a nasty side to the music business. 25 DJs were caught accepting bribes that year. Casey earned enemies after declining $500 offers from labels. Even when it meant taking chances, he remained truthful. He relocated to Cleveland in 1960 to work for WBNY. The Payola controversy erupted at this precise moment. There were almost 300 DJs involved, and many of them received fines or were dismissed. Chubby Checker's popular song, The Twist, was played during Casey's rock show. He turned down a label's $1,000 offer to play a track. His ratings abruptly fell by 20%. Rumors circulated among rivals claimed he was complicit in the incident. He was fielding 100 calls for dedications every night and earning $400 a month. He even had to give an anonymous statement while the FBI was looking into it. Nevertheless, he maintained a spotless reputation. On air, he once exposed a label executive. He was given a 10% raise by his station in 1961 for refusing to back down. However, the entire episode exposed the potential for corruption in the radio industry. He bravely moved to Oakland in 1963 and joined KEWB. He began going by Casey Kasem full-time this time. Hundreds of listeners called in when he created request dedications. He created themed concerts like Love Lines and performed early Beatles songs that had only started to sell in the U.S. His following quickly increased from 20,000 to over 23,000 people. However, chaos ensued. During the civil rights era, in particular, Management urged him to push songs with political undertones. He was threatened with censorship and did not always cooperate. The station attempted to conceal a drug bust in 1964 that resulted in the arrest of multiple coworkers. Kasem declined. Because he spoke out, he nearly lost his job. He continued to produce shows that brought people together in spite of all the pressure. Kasem took a big chance in 1970. He came up with a concept with his friend Don Biney that had never been done before. Their goal was to develop a radio program that would use actual Billboard chart figures to rank the top 40 songs in the nation. Just the facts, no more local DJ partiality. However, no one thought it would succeed. To finance the first episode, Kasem had to take out a $15,000 loan secured by his home. On July 4, 1970, that episode began airing on just 7 tiny stations. 3 Dog Nights Mama Told Me Not to Come was the first #1 single. Behind the scenes, industry insiders referred to the presentation as a gimmick and laughed at it. However, it was being played on more than 100 stations by the end of that year. It was difficult to persuade radio station executives. None of them wanted anything to be syndicated. They believed local flavor would be destroyed by a national show. A few even threatened legal action. When Kasem personally contacted more than 500 station directors, he kept being disconnected. He was even warned by one man that syndication would violate FCC regulations. Nevertheless, Kasem persisted. He drove across the nation in an old Volkswagen to distribute demo recordings himself, and he worked 12-hour days from a small office. The tape reel actually broke live on broadcast on the first day of the show, but engineers were able to fix it. They had 200 stations by 1971, but Kasem continued to deal with irate DJs, and even death threats from those who felt displaced. Boston took care of business as usual, while Kasem captivated everyone who would listen. Then a miracle occurred. On July 18, 1970, on the 3rd episode, Kasem read a letter from a soldier who wanted to dedicate Cat Stevens' Wild World to his wife. It was the first dedication made over long distances. The audience adored it. They were getting 10,000 letters a week by 1972. A Dying Child's Request for Bridge Over Troubled Water in 1971 was one of the heartbreaking anecdotes. When Kasem read it live, she started crying. Ratings soared. Fans saw something genuine in the piece, despite the fact that critics initially criticized it for being overly sentimental. In 1973, Kasem met one of the senders and personally selected the letters. However, not every story was accepted. Because it seemed overly political, one in 1974 led to a boycott. Nevertheless, the section turned became the show's focal point. It was obvious that Kasem had produced more than just music. He had established a rapport. Radio was rife with corruption in the 1970s. In order to drive phony hits up the charts, major labels bribed DJs to play their tunes. Kasem declined to participate. He adhered rigorously to the Billboard numbers. He referred to payola as the industry's cancer in a 1972 Rolling Stone interview. He once received a $50,000 offer to move American Pie up the charts. He declined and informed the FBI of it. He even gave a congressional testimony in 1973, describing how this cheating may propel a song up 20 or 30 slots. Some bosses were offended by his candor. Even ABC attempted to persuade him to change in 1975, but he refused. As a result, the show's ratings dropped from 300 to 250 stations. But he continued. He had a strong moral compass from his duty as a World War II soldier, which helped him win every battle. The show grew lengthier by 1974. In order to include more trivia and artist anecdotes, it was extended from 3 to 4 hours. Every week, Kasem devoted over 40 hours to manually compiling information from newspapers and libraries. To avoid being recognized by his supporters, he even went disguised. He once discovered an old Beatles scandal that caused a 15% increase in ratings. The lengthier version of the show was formally introduced on January 26, 1974. The pressure was intense, yet the crowd continued to rise. Overwork caused Kasem to have a health crisis in 1976. In 1975, one error involving David Bowie even resulted in legal threats. Fans, however, adored the trivia. They discovered that the most popular songs from 1974 lasted only roughly 3.2 minutes. 840 was earning more than $10 million annually by 1979. The program was broadcast on over 500 stations nationwide by 1978. A national treasure was created from what started with just 7 stations. The annual specials were eagerly anticipated. Elton John's 9 #1 songs by 1976 were among the startling facts Casey would divulge. Now a regular feature of the show, the long-distance dedications were fostering emotional connections amongst viewers. Sometimes the only thing that could bring two people who were on opposite sides of the world together was a song that was played on the show. The situation worsened in 1980. Letters from other nations were now arriving. Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd was requested by a soldier in Germany. An Australian fan requested Queen's Crazy Little Thing, called Love, while riots raged back home. These international tales gave the program a completely new dimension. In just a few months, listenership increased by 30%. It all came together in the July 1980 10th anniversary special. The show, which drew 10,000 people to the Hollywood Bowl, included celebrities including Paul McCartney and Donna Summer. Although the entire event cost $100,000, it felt like a celebration of a significant cultural event. The program was controversial once more in 1985, when Frankie Goes to Hollywood's song Relax made it to the US Top 10. Casey played it despite the BBC banning it because of its explicit lyrics. In the United States, Relax sold more than 2 million copies that year. Casey did not waver. He was a firm believer in being honest, even if it caused discomfort to some. He had also played Prince's I Want to Be Your Lover years before, which many people felt was too provocative. His refusal to censor was praised by his fans. In 1980, Casey also launched American Top 20, a spin-off program. It included in-person interviews and a concentration on softer adult hits. Michael Jackson discussed Thriller in an episode from 1982, claiming that it sold 1 million copies per week. Donna Summer discussed The Wanderer in another episode. By 1981, the program had quickly gained popularity, airing on 200 stations. It brought in $5 million annually, and even spawned America's Top 10, a television program that Casey helmed until 1989. However, everything fell apart in July 1988. After a heated argument with ABC, Casey departed AT40. They wanted him to speak in a different, more edgy tone. He declined. He later claimed that they owed him more than $1 million. After 18 years, he left and started a new program called Casey's Top 40 in January 1989. Although it featured unique elements like vegan tips, it maintained the same aesthetic. It had more listeners than AT40 by 1990. His previous show was only airing on 150 stations, but Casey was now on 200. According to leaked memos, ABC attempted to hinder his return, but was unsuccessful. In 1998, a remarkable event occurred. Casey outbid everyone and paid $7 million to reclaim the rights to AT40. He brought the show up to date when he returned. No other program did what he did. Read email dedications. He read an email dedication for Britney Spears, Toxic, in March 2004. Once more, ratings soared. He included digital features and online polls. However, he was secretly facing health issues, such as the early stages of Parkinson's disease. Despite being ill, Casey continued to work. Up until 2009, he kept on voice Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, even recording from a studio inside his house. He demonstrated how much of himself he contributed to each character by making jokes about being vegan in the screenplay. He had around 500 lines recorded for the character by then. Fans noted that he was slurring his voice in 2008. He continued to the very end, even though producers had to clean up the recordings in post-production. 12 unreleased Shaggy recordings were discovered after his passing and broadcast posthumously in 2014. Casey also advocated for causes with his notoriety. He made appearances in PETA advertisements, endorsing vegetarianism in the 1990s. He once said that his life was altered in 1970 after visiting a slaughterhouse. He linked his beliefs to his Lebanese heritage, claiming that plant-based lifestyle was encouraged by ancient literature in his culture. Up until July 2009, he hosted Casey's Countdown, where he played singles like 1998's My Heart Will Go On by Celine Dion. 5 million people listened to it every week at its height. In 2005, he feared losing sponsors for refusing to soften his message, and he donated $100,000 to vegan charities. From the outside, Casey Kasem's life appeared to be ideal, but beneath the beloved voice of millions, a storm had been brewing for years. He wed Linda Myers in 1972. Together, they had 3 kids: Mike in 1974, Julie in 1977, and Carrie in 1972. Initially, everything appeared to be joyful. With the American Top 40 and his well-known roles as Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, Casey was rising to fame. However, Linda was having difficulties at home, while everyone else was applauding him. His workdays grew to 18 hours by the late 1970s. His family thought they were chasing him, but he was chasing success. Their marriage ended in 1979. On November 9th, the divorce was formalized in Los Angeles. In addition to $500,000 in alimony and $3,000 monthly in child support, Linda was granted custody of the children. What was more painful, though, was Casey's growing distance. His kids never forgot that he didn't come around too often. The injuries didn't get better. In actuality, their depth merely increased over time. Actress Jean Thompson and Casey were married in a grandiose ceremony at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel on December 21, 1980, just 1 year later. On the surface, it appeared to be a new beginning. They had a daughter, Liberty, in 1990. However, that marriage evolved into something more sinister. Casey's health deteriorated over time, and by 2013, his elder children started to speak up. They said that Jean kept him sequestered in their $43 million property in the hills. She maintained strict control over everything, forbade them from visiting, and prohibited him from using the phone. They accused her of abuse in court documents dated 2014. On May 7, 2014, Gan is accused of hurling raw flesh at Carrie, while yelling Bible passages in a startling incident. According to her, the kids just desired Casey's $80 million money. However, matters worsened when Jean abruptly seized Casey and vanished to Washington. Later, their daughter Liberty talked of her early years and the division in their household. She said that her mother deliberately kept the family divided. In 2015, a wrongful death case resulted from all of this. For years, the truth regarding Casey's condition had been suppressed. Although he received a Parkinson's diagnosis on October 15, 2007, he didn't make his condition public until 2013. His symptoms had gotten worse by then. In 2014, he was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia. After losing his voice and being unable to walk, he was unable to talk at all. Early in 2014, Carrie, Mike, and Julie, his elder children, requested that the court grant them custody of him. Gan was allegedly ignoring him. He suffered from horrible illnesses and bed sores. A judge was informed on May 12 that Casey's physician had cautioned Jean that her conduct could seriously injure her body. Her attempt to exert control over Casey's $100 million estate was perceived by the family. One bed sore had grown 4 inches deep by June, and Casey was in septic shock. He passed away on June 15, 2014, a few days later. Carrie founded Kasem Cares to advocate for elder visitation rights in the midst of all of this suffering. However, in 2015, the family filed a civil claim when prosecutors continued to decline to prosecute charges. The nation was rocked by the 2014 family war. At 2:30 a.m. on May 7, Jean picked Casey up from a care facility in Santa Monica. She drove him more than 1,000 meters to Washington after disconnecting his feeding tube. On the way, they made a stop in Las Vegas. No one was aware of their location. On May 20, Carrie reported abuse, and a judge ordered a search. On May 15, Casey was discovered in a modest Silverdale house. He had lost 20 pounds and had a urinary tract infection. Carrie, the conservator appointed by the judge, said that Jean's decisions caused Casey's demise. At the age of 82, he died on June 15, 2014. Then came the most startling part. In defiance of their desires and far from the rest of the family, Jean buried Casey in Norway. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Jean in 2015 and sought $250,000. What was remained of the family was shattered by the battle, which revealed a fierce dispute over an estate worth between $80 and $100 million. Both parties made accusations against one another. However, Casey's difficulties did not only occur at home. Casey lost his anger while recording for American Top 40 in 1985, A Deceased Puppy. Casey blew apart. He swore aloud that such an emotional leap was not conceivable. His normally serene voice broke with rage. The date of that audio clip's recording was September 14, 1985. Hearing more than 10 profanities in less than 2 minutes astounded the fans. The tape went viral and showed them a hitherto undiscovered aspect of Casey. He had another tantrum while reading a lengthy, dull script later that year. He said repeatedly, "Ponderous man, ponderous." The 90-second tirade was rife with expletives. Fans were startled once more. Behind the scenes, he was demanding and quickly irritated, despite his generally cheery on-air persona. On the internet, these idiots rose to fame. He had a dark side, people began to joke. More tapes were leaked throughout the 1990s. In one from 1992, immediately following a fast-paced YouTube song, he yelled about having to discuss someone's deceased pet. These irate outtakes, which lasted more than 5 minutes, included him shouting, "Who the writes this shit?" Those who had previously viewed him as America's DJ began to perceive a completely different person. The tapes were circulated on bootleg cassettes, circa 1995. In a single take, one of them used 18 profanities. It circulated swiftly, and the legend of Casey's fury intensified. These clips were on the internet by 2000. They have been downloaded over 1 million times by fans. He used around 20 profanity words in one 3-minute recording. The manner he screamed at employees startled people. Some even claimed to feel deceived. 65% of supporters expressed disappointment, according to a poll. It was described as a meltdown by Entertainment Weekly. Syndication ratings had a 20% decline. His team attempted to defuse the situation by claiming it was simply stress, but the damage was already done. By 2005, a video titled "Profane Meltdown" had received 2 million views. Casey acknowledged in a 1995 interview that the outbursts were genuine, but he described them as therapeutic. Before returning to his composed demeanor on air, he utilized them to release tension. He claimed that there had only ever been 3 eruptions, but the gossip persisted. In the 1970s, he was even accused of yelling at Scooby-Doo animators. The rumors were sustained by past interviews and TikTok videos. His supporters remained split after he had hosted more than 1,000 programs. He was forgiven by some but not by others. Poliola was one thing Casey refused to give in to. In 1975, when record labels were paying DJs up to $50,000 to play specific songs, he told Billboard magazine, "I won't touch Poliola. It's poison." However, Casey declined. He did what he was told. Only what the Billboard charts verified was played on his show. Casey maintained his reputation, as other radio hosts faced fines or termination. Significant changes in the industry were impacted by his candor. For more than 40 years, he remained above the scandals, leaving a legacy that was heard by nearly 1 billion people. Strange conspiracy ideas started to circulate online in the 2000s. Casey was accused of falsifying listener dedications in order to receive payment. However, producers eventually provided evidence that all of the dedications were genuine. They have audio of actual conversations and postmarked letters from all around the nation. Producers made raw audio available in 2012, demonstrating that everything was authentic. Myths would not die, however. The dead dog rant was just exasperation, but others even used it as evidence of fraud. After 1974 laws that imposed severe penalties for cheating made rigging nearly impossible, Casey maintained his spotless record. A 2014 Rolling Stone story ultimately clarified the situation, when others attempted to use those leaked out takes as proof that he had staged the performance. According to his producers, he never intended to take advantage of the system. He simply detested awkward script transitions. He even became upset with a YouTube video in 1987 because it lacked accurate data. The charts were never the focus of these outbursts. In fact, there was absolutely no rigging, according to a 2015 FBI study. But thanks to the internet and old cassettes, the rumors persisted.